Welcome everybody to our Center for Practice Excellence rounds for February 3rd, 2020. My name is Zubin Austin and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's presentation. Our topic today is clinical trial design informing technology implementation strategies, the journey of one pharmacist. Who is that one pharmacist, you ask? His name is Sean Spina. Let me give you a quick introduction to Sean. He is a clinical researcher and coordinator of clinical services at Royal Jubilee Hospital in Victoria, British Columbia, and also a clinical associate professor with UBC. He's always been interested in incorporating technology into clinical practice and has presented internationally on his research, including how technology impacts clinical communication and workflows. He led the rollout of iPhones to pharmacists across Vancouver Island and has focused research efforts on objectively assessing the impacts that mobile technology has on operational efficiency and the delivery of patient care. The discussant for today's rounds will be Jim Bowen. Jim is a clinical research manager at the THETA Collaborative out of the University Health Network, a program manager at Diabetes Action Canada, as well as an assistant professor at McMaster University. I'd also like to point out, as Jim and I reflected, that Jim and I have a personal stake in the issue of information technology in pharmacy. The happiest day of my entire professional life, getting on to 35 years ago, was the day I was able to hand over my pager as the manager for informatics at Mount Sinai Hospital to Jim when I moved to the university. Close to 30 years ago.
It is a long,
yeah,
long,
close to 30
long
years
ago.
Yeah. So thank you, Jim, for taking the pager and for being our discussant today. Thank you, Sean, for being our presenter today. Sean will present for approximately 30 minutes. We will then have Jim reflect on the presentation and then open it to everyone for questions. Sean, take it away.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for inviting me here to present today. It's truly a pleasure and a privilege to come here. I've never been to your beautiful school, and thanks for bringing the sunshine out this afternoon. I really appreciate it. But more seriously, I really appreciate Lisa for moving the session from last Thursday, your usual days, to today. It made my schedule easier as opposed to coming Wednesday and sort of waiting to do that. So thank you very, very much. It's nice to do it in person as well, instead of over the phone or something like that. So I'm from Victoria, and I just also wanted to introduce Ravi Parmar as one of our residents from the hospital who's here with me, and he wanted to come by. We both wanted to see your fantastic school. So thank you for inviting us and letting us in the door. At the point, because I don't have a clicker, unfortunately, so Ellie's going to help me out. So I just wanted to start off as I've had an incredible privilege over the years of I feel like I'm the guy in the middle who gets to hold the Stanley Cup quite often in the work that I do. But I'm surrounded by an incredible group of people, and I had to look back to 1967. For those, I'm a Canucks fan, and there's nowhere to look back to because they've never won. But I had to look back to 1967 for this picture, and team is so important to me, and I think we only become successful and get to go down our journeys if we have a team surrounding us, and that team. Using the Stanley Cup analogy, sure, I get to travel around and I get to win awards and stuff, but it's other people I'm working with, colleagues, administrators, the managers, the owners, the fans, and people that I get to do the work with. So it's truly a family that raises a child, so to speak. We all know this guy, Albert Einstein, and I like what he says, is that fear the day that technology will surpass our human interaction, we'll have a generation of idiots. And I'll leave that to you to decide where we are, but I sort of want to do some of my work to inform how we actually integrate this technology in practice. So I do have a contracted research program. Vocera gives me unrestricted education or research funding for that. I also have had products from Apple Canada for evaluation purposes in the healthcare setting, as well as Clean Slate, a local startup company. We'll be talking about some of the work I did with them. I also more recently have begun advising with HP Global on some of their healthcare product developments with them as well. And to the best of my knowledge, I'm not being paid to chat with you. The one thing I do want to highlight, this is a strange presentation for me. I'm used to presenting data. This is about sort of my journey and how I've used data to move down my path, and it's truly about me, but it's about the group that I've worked with. Okay. So when I started my journey, if you will, I graduated pharmacy, I did a residency, and I became a clinical pharmacist. Or I finished my residency. I got hired to be a clinical pharmacist in internal medicine. And I had this idea that clinical pharmacy was where it was at. Everywhere in the country, because very young and naive, everywhere in the country, clinical pharmacy is where it's at. Every ward's going to have a clinical pharmacist. Every time we build a hospital or expand a ward, we're going to have clinical pharmacy services. And that was 24 years ago, 23 years ago. We do rounds, pharmacokinetic monitoring, physical exam. I did it with Ed Dillon in Vancouver, a big proponent of physical exam. And I really was, this is awkward, I'm sorry. My mind was blown when I actually got to working, and I realized that pharmacy is not integrated everywhere. Pharmacy is not essential. And the other thing is as much as I thought I brought value to the work I was doing, I realized when I became a leader there that we're a unionized shop in BC. I don't know if the hospital here is unionized or not, but regardless, we were preparing for the first strike to go through, and they said, "Oh, Sean, what do you need for staff?" And I said, "Well, I need this many clinical pharmacists, et cetera, et cetera." And they said, "Why?" And I'm like, "Well, we need to do all these pharmacokinetics and blah, blah, blah." And they said, "Well, what do you have for the Easter long weekend working?" And I said, "Nobody, for Monday through Friday, 8 till 4, bankers hours." And they said, "Well, okay, on day 5, thank you guys so much, appreciate it. On day 5, you can have a pharmacist." And from that point forward, I realized I have to align what I'm doing to make pharmacy somewhat essential. So one of the things I thought about over as I prepared for this talk, this was actually very therapeutic for me to reflect back on the last 2 decades of my career. And I've never done a talk like this where I talk about my journey through my first half of my career, if you will. So some of the things I thought that were really important for me were a vision. And I'm going to talk about my vision in 2 slides from now. But setting a vision early on of where you want to go. And I also tell all my residents and students to set a vision as to where you want to go in your career and stay true to that. Have the courage to follow that vision, have the courage to push the envelope a little bit, and don't have to just stay in the cookie cutter pharmacy mold. Push the envelope, as you talked about the other day. We're the typical Canadians, very conservative, if you will. Mm-hmm. Set goals along the way, and don't be afraid to adjust those goals as we go through our journey. And the one thing I got taught in pharmacy education is process. We need to establish a clear, concise process to going through problems and think them in a rational way. For me, one of the most important things I've done through my career is to have mentors. And even just a month ago, I've developed some new mentors because I'm into a new area that I'm not comfortable with. But mentors allow people to have success. And it's not just for the 19-year-old fresh graduate that needs a mentor. I think all of us need mentors in life. And then surround yourself with an incredible team and let them do the work that they're good at. The final thing I'll say, and I guess now, back in when I started out, we put all our stuff on binders and put them on shelves, but now they're on digital sticks and stuff like that. But you have to publish yourself. You do all this fantastic work. We do all this fantastic work. And if you don't publish it, no one else knows about it. So that would be one of my last things I would mention before I get going. So I think setting a vision is really solid. So I chatted with Patricia Gerber from UBC. So I did my undergrad at UBC and my PharmD at UBC. And when I graduated, we had to put our bio up on the website. Well, the website's changed over the last 20 years. And but my vision at that time, I had 2 things that I put in my bio, and I have them written down at home. And one of them was incorporate technology into clinical practice. That's something that I've always wanted to do. And the second thing was establish clinical pharmacy as essential. And I thought that those 2 things are important to me, technology and my craft of clinical pharmacy. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing is I had this idea that I wanted to be an international speaker. I had a feeling I'd be internationally speaking on drugs, not on technology, but you never know where this journey is going to take you, right? So the other thing is what I'm going to say is the vision is there in the head of where we're trying to get to all the time, but the path is unknown. I've been down these rabbit holes and you come back, but it's all under the same umbrella of a common vision. So in the beginning, where it began for me is where, when you were saying that your biggest day, your most exciting day was getting rid of that pager. For me, in 2010, what I had done is I went to the airport, and if any of you I'm sure have traveled to the airport, you strip down, you take everything off, you get scanned as you go through. And I took my then pager and I tossed it in the bin. I didn't have any ID or anything. And the security guard, she says to me, "You work in healthcare, don't you?" And I looked at her. I said, how do you know? And this was 2010, so a decade ago. And she said, well, we'd never page our accountant or our lawyer, but we would page a physician. She didn't know if I was a pharmacist, doctor, whatever. But the idea was we'd page a physician. It was so true. If you had an accountant in 2010 and said, yeah, give me a page if you want to talk to me, you'd be like, very good accountant. So what I did is I came home from that meeting, and I went to the health authority. I started thinking about this idea that the security guard said to me, we have all, you're communicating by pager in this relatively high-end, leading-edge medical field. And so I thought about it. I thought, okay, we put all this money into a bunch of technology, MRI for CT scanner, for example, and we just put all this money into it. And then, but the interesting thing is when a patient gets really sick, what they do is we go to this thing called a telephone. And if you give any 18 or 19-year-old this thing and ask them how to use it, they don't know how to use it. It's quite comical. Actually, I have to give this example. I'm sorry, Ravi, but Ravi's girlfriend, when she's a pharmacist as well, she did her residency with this, and I had to give a pager because we didn't have a smartphone, so I gave her a pager. And don't tell Karen I said this, but she's, what do I do with this? What do I do with this? It was absolutely perfect. I'm like, yeah, I've aged. So we page a physician when the patients are getting sick, and then we're just wasting a bunch of time. So I remember back in the day, I'd sit at a table, I'd sit down, and I'd wait for that phone to ring. Just sitting there waiting, and I can't do anything else because I gotta wait for that phone to ring, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting, and then you eventually tell the unit clerk, hey, if Dr. Whoever phones, can you tell them about this clinical issue? And it just seemed like craziness. So I went to the health authority and said, hey, I want to give all of my my pharmacists who, when we came, they were all locked up in the dispensary doing the dispensing duties. And we had one pharmacist on their board. We're 510 bed hospital. And we moved them up to the floor, but I can no longer communicate. When they're all in one room, you can just talk. But when they're all desperate up on the floors, you can't communicate. So I said, I want to give them smartphones. And they said, well, Sean, we have no money for that. And I'm like, okay. So they said, well, rather than, but we're interested in it and it makes sense to us. So rather than just throwing money down the toilet, can you provide us the evidence? And of course, I'm a good pharmacist, all about the evidence. So I thought, okay, well, what can we do? So I had a student on rotation with me, Andrea. So I said, we went looking for the evidence, and there's absolutely no evidence that smartphones did anything good for any communication in healthcare at all. So we published on it because that's my adage. You publish everything you learn so others can learn from that. And then from that point, we realized there was no evidence for anything. We started thinking, what is a good impact? If we want to create impact, what do you do? So I'm assuming you guys were all pharmacy type people in the room. I'm trained in clinical trial design, and I'm very used to drug A versus drug B, or drug A versus placebo, and structuring clinical trial designs. So what I thought was, let's do a clinical trial design, but let's apply it to the technology field. Well, I have to tell you, whenever I went to meet with technology people and talk to them about my crazy ideas of, let's assess this thing, rather than giving you millions of dollars for said piece of technology, let's assess the technology and see what the impact is on patient care. We're in a publicly funded healthcare system, single payer system, all of us pay taxes. How can we waste money on this technology without knowing if it's doing anything? We would never mix up drugs in my world and just say, Jim, can you try this? We think I don't know, it's white. You know, we would never do that to people, but for technology guys, we'd spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on technology with no idea if it does anything. And we're familiar with that this is just a slide to talk about technology clinical trials. And so the other thing which I did was data drives decisions. I learned very early on that the only way that anybody listens for money, etc., budget adjustments and that sort of stuff, is to have some data. And so I'm the key clinical pharmacy key performance indicator registry. So circa 2010, Alavo Fernandez here at UHN. I work on the national CPKPI working group, and because along with my vision of establishing or playing a piece in establishing clinical pharmacy as essential members of the care team, I thought this work was perfectly aligned with that, trying to provide evidence that clinical pharmacy is doing some meaningful work. The other thing is, as a researcher in Island Health now, I have an established research program, and this is on our Island Health website, and all the work that we're doing is there, and all our projects are there as well, and it's just starting to become a building up of all the work that we're doing. So going back a few years, as I mentioned, when I showed up at the hospital in 2008, all our pharmacists were in the dispensary, and Sherry Lally, my colleague, and I decided to move all our pharmacists to the wards. And then through that process, and what we did, we actually learned a bunch of things, and we again published on it. And it's interesting. I thought we were already there. This is 2008, and I thought in 1998, 1999, we were already there across the country. And it was just incredible to me. But when we published this, so many people reached out to us. And to tell you the truth, in November, I had a group in Edmonton reach out to me to talk to me about this paper still, 10 years after we published it. So it's making me realize that we're not quite there yet. And then what came out of there was they actually agreed to give me money. They said, Sean, go out and buy 90 iPhones, and you can have 90 iPhones, but you have to actually study the impact of it. And that's actually where my love and my ability to establish my own research program started, was because I was supported by my local hospital. Did a project with Jessica Power, Curtis Harder, Sherry Lally, and a few others. And we actually looked at giving pharmacists iPhones, and then actually assessing the impact on their efficiency. And in a nutshell, what we did is we gave them all phones, and we had them answer questions. And I like to have an objective, measurable outcome. So you can imagine if we gave patients a hypertensive medication, and then we asked them, hey, how do you feel on your hypertensive medication as a primary outcome, a subjective measurement, if you will. It just doesn't have the same impact unless you have a quantitative measurement. So I made sure that we had a quantitative measure for the outcome, which was we gave them 20 situational drug questions. They could only answer with their dual screen monitors, computer hooked up to the internet. And then after they had the smartphones, they could use whatever they want. They had to only use the smartphones to answer similar types of questions, and they were actually answer them faster with their smartphones. That was our primary outcome, which was to symbolize when they're at the bedside rounding, they don't have to go back to their computer to look stuff up. They don't have to carry their books in their pockets and that sort of stuff. So this was us rolling out all these smartphones, and today's common practice, it's not a big deal, but we are still the only department in the whole health authority where our frontline staff have smartphones. None of the other departments, they still have pagers. But it was fantastic because I was rolling them out, and actually it was October 31st, and on November 1st, I was heading up island in order to distribute the smartphones, and I had them by the door, and my wife was putting out the candy for the kids for Halloween, and I went, wow, this is impressive. We like to be the best best house on the street if you're giving out iPhones, but this is the iPhone 4. I had to make sure I actually moved them from the door before we started the real, that was just a photo op. So what we found was we asked pharmacists if they agree or strongly agree, and 98% of them said they agreed or strongly agree that they find smartphones to be useful. 87% said they agree or strongly agree that it helped them in their job. 68% said they needed more training on the use of them. Now remember, this was 2012, and 63% had never had a smartphone before. And one person actually didn't want the smartphone. He actually wanted to keep his pager, and he was a young guy. He was 24 years old, which just did not fit with who I thought were not going to want smartphones. And then almost half the people said it increased their confidence in resolving drug therapy problems. And I'll argue that every pharmacist is put on the planet to identify, solve, and prevent drug therapy problems. So that made me feel good. So then we learned from that project there's a bunch of problems with that, because first of all, when we put just iMessage each other, it doesn't satisfy Canadian privacy laws. There's no global database on there. There's a bunch of other things. So we started to do a formal study, which came out of that, which we used a product called the THETA Collaboration Suite and did another project. And what we found with a secure messaging system, that we did turnaround time for pages, and without getting into all the details of the trial, we found that it was statistically significantly faster for people if they used a secure digital system to communicate with each other, from about 5 minutes to 3 minutes on a turnaround time. So if you page somebody, and we did this in the trial, how long before they return that page? And if you send them a message through a secure system, how long before you got the response back? And it was faster if they had the system, because they could look at it, like right now, if I get a text, if it's the hospital, it's like, oh, it's urgent, okay, I maybe need to step out, sorry everybody. But if it's, I don't know, someone wanting to go for dinner tonight, it's like, oh, okay, I can wait till I'm finished talking, hear this thing. The other thing is the high priority one. So we found that the numbers are very small, which was not statistically significant, but when you need to talk to somebody now, if you can give them context in a secure message, they have some idea what they're responding to. And then what was born from that was, I really think we're in a disparate healthcare system where we have GPs and families, and the patients are cared for by their GPs and their families 99% of the time. I just made that number up, but they're cared for your GPs and your community pharmacy a lot of the time. They come to the hospital and they have some black box magic procedure done to them. And we in the hospital, we don't really know, we can't communicate very well with the GPs. And then when we send them back to the GPs, they don't really know what happened in the hospital. They don't know what we changed. We can't communicate with them. Communication is appalling, is what I'm trying to say, between those two areas. And so we collaborated with the Victoria Division of Family Practice, the South Island Division of Family Practice, a bunch of GPs in the Victoria area is what that means. Shared Care, which is a provincial group about how to work together, if you will, and I work out at UBC as well. And we actually collaborated together because we found that there was a real challenge here. We need to actually transition patients back and forth. I'm not talking EHR, because I think we could probably should benefit from a shared EHR. I'm talking about talking to each other. And I got involved with a group called Transitions in Care. I said to them, can we just get an accurate list of phone numbers? Because my staff would go to phone the GP, and there's no phone number list. They're searching for 10 minutes on the internet trying to find a list of phone. And they, well, there's a bunch of reasons why you can't do that. And I'm like, are you serious? I can't get an accurate list of phone numbers. So there was a real benefit and a challenge to doing this work. So we're currently in the process of publishing this work. But what we found out from this, which was interesting to me, so I have all the details here, but I'd be talking for 3 hours, so I won't present all the details of every project. But we had a bunch of hospital staff, physicians, pharmacists, some nurses, ER specialists in the hospital, and we had 76 or 77 family doctors. And I get asked all the time, how in the world did you get 76 or 77 family doctors, individual businessmen or women, on their own to put your health authority app on their phone and communicate on it? And I don't know the answer to that. All I know is we asked. We asked, and they wanted to, we went to their AGM, and it was actually them that wanted to communicate more with the hospital. Physicians, they want to care for their patients. That's their number one thing that they do, is they want to care for patients, and they saw that communication was an issue, and they wanted to participate. So what we did is, this is, I haven't printed this out or anything, because this is actually the first time it's ever been characterized this way. This is a Santee diagram, and on the left you'll see this is where the messages started from, and on the right is where the messages went. It's very hard to do this research, and there's positive data out there, but what we found is that pharmacists were talking to pharmacists about this. Like, this is 3 years ago when we started this project. They were talking to pharmacists, but if you look at the orange lines, you can see that it's gone into the hospitalists in the hospital, med micro, the specialists. It actually goes into the allied health, family docs, and emergency medicine and nurses. You can also go back the other side and look at the red line for specialists, for example. They're talking to pharmacists, etc. family physicians are talking to various people as well. It really highlighted for us how complex healthcare communication is. It has never been captured before that we could find. We also found through this project as well, roughly 83% were neutral, agree, or strongly agree that the app allowed for better care to their patients. This is the clinicians. Some people disagreed, obviously. And also about 53% agreed or strongly agreed that they're satisfied with using the app. Some people had issues with the app, and we've actually fed those back. And the technologies have improved a lot since we first piloted this thing as well. So for me personally, I think that technology and communication is an issue in the healthcare system. I think that the use of mobile technology is where healthcare communication should go. And then I was thinking about it. I use my my Apple Watch. It doesn't matter Apple Watch or any other smartwatch. A smartwatch of sorts to communicate. I can be in rounds. I can be at a bedside, and I can see if someone has texted me and what they want. I can decide if I'm going to leave the bedside. So I'm like, okay, well, we're going to push forward with smartwatch, wearables, and smartphones. And then I went, it's against hand hygiene policy. I can't wear a tie at the bedside. I can't wear a long sleeve shirt at the bedside. I can't wear a watch at the bedside, and I can't wear a ring, which is fine, but it's the watch. If I think that's the future, what are we going to do? So I went off to HIMSS, which is a huge technology conference, 45,000 people. The vendor field was about 2 football fields big. Has anybody been to HIMSS before? So it's huge. And so I went off and presented there. And I thought, I'm going to find out about some sort of how do we clean these things? So that's going to be an issue. There was 2 vendors out of 2 football fields of vendors that actually had a cleaning solution. So I came back and I worked with Stephanie Huffman and Carly Webb on a project called the iSwipe trial and investigations into cleaning methods of smartphones and wearables from infectious contamination in a patient care environment, because I saw that this cleaning thing was going to be an issue with pushing the agenda forward to improve communications. So what happened is we, my head keeps going in, I apologize for that. We actually published the paper. We finished it last July. We wrote it up and submitted it in August. It was published in the American Journal of Infection Control in end of October. And what we found was the Vocera, so this is a percentage of devices that grew bacteria, and then the isolates on the bottom, the different types of devices, if you will. So the purple is skin flora. We swab anybody's skin, we're going to get Staph aureus and some other things on there, just natural skin flora. We're crawling with bacteria, but don't tell anyone. And then we scanned the badges as well. So the Vocera badges, they grew 7% pathogens. The green is the pathogens. Smartwatches were 14%. Smartphones were 22%. And we normalized it to ID badges, and I didn't come to Toronto with my ID badge, but we have to wear those things. There you go. And sorry, I'm going to put you on the spot. I didn't even notice it until you brought it up. Yeah. Everybody at our hospital can wear lanyards around our neck like that, but I can't wear a tie. And as far as I'm concerned, that is a tie that you're wearing around your neck. And I told her, yeah. So, but they're 23%. So I'm not allowed to wear a smartwatch, but I'm allowed to wear. I'm mandated basically to wear my ID badge. And, maybe not mandated, but I'm expected to wear my ID badge when I'm on site. And then they had some iPod touches as well. We had some technology with them. They're basically like smartphones. They were 50% were growing pathogens. And so we published this information. And the other thing is we use this ultraviolet light box, if you will, suntanning bed, I like to call it. The device is called Clean Slate, made by just some startup company down here in Toronto. I went and presented the results to them. And we did baseline. So 23% of the devices grew yucky bacteria at baseline. And then what we did is we got them to use it for BID or twice a day for 2 weeks. And then they came in and we gave them, we grabbed a device from them and we did a formal, you guys know vancomycin pre and post trough levels. Mm-hmm. That's basically what we did here. We grabbed the device from them, we swabbed them, and then we put them inside the cleaning oven, if you will. We took our gloves off, we zapped them. So that was swab 1, which is the pre-UVC. And then they came out of the device and we swabbed them again, and that was the post-UVC. So this was statistically significantly different. And what we found that our numbers went down from 20 some odd percent to 4%. And people ask me, why did it not go to 0? And the idea is all of us have our own cases. Some are cloth. If you go to the beach and put an umbrella up, you're not going to get a sunburn. No different as if you have a shadow in here, the bacteria can still harbor in there. So that's why it didn't go to 0 in our interpretation. So this is what the little device looks like here. It's about this big. When we put these devices inside of it, we actually found that it killed a lot of bacteria. And as such, this is now taken off, and we're expanding across the hospitals. We are actually putting them in our two new hospitals that are already budgeted for these devices, as well as plan to roll them across the entire health authority. And as a pharmacist, as a researcher, this was the most rewarding experience ever. I don't care about the company making money. That is not at all why it's rewarding. It's rewarding that I had the opportunity to do research that directly informed a practice change. So it was pretty exciting. My wife, she goes, Sean, I can't believe that people pay you to go to work every day to play on your phone. And I literally feel like that's what I get paid to do every day, is go to work and play on my phone. I don't eat a lot of ice cream, but I do have fun with all the gadgets and stuff, if you will. This is sort of what I feel like it is, though. It's living the dream. It's all the presentations, awards, and publications, and grant proposals, all that sort of stuff. It's sort of how it feels every day. Where am I seeing that with time? 5 minutes. Okay. 29 minutes. Okay. This was our research capacity building team, or they actually said this as a board report, supporting research one dreamer at a time. There's so much support that you don't have to read all this. There's so much support that I have for personal support and programming support and ethics and impact and a bunch of awards. It's been incredible. I've had the ability to travel the world doing research. I was just mentioning to you guys, I was in Dubai 2 years ago talking about healthcare communication, talking about how we can engage family docs in order to communicate with each other. And even in Dubai, where they have all the money in the world, I think they have a lot of money in Dubai, they're still communicating with pagers. And the Sheikh actually outlawed them in 2021. So we'll see what happens. Like I was mentioning, I think fax machines are still a staple, the way of ordering drugs. But as I think about it, I think that actually it's the research, it's the approach, it's how we approach the problems, which has resulted in the impact by quantifying stuff. I've actually left lessons learned for me. This is a couple things I talk about. This has been very impactful for me. It was about the hospital story, about the going through security, everything. That's where it all started for me. And then out of the iSwipe trial, it just came together. Like I said, we finished in July, submitted in August, published in October. It hit the newspaper around the world that we did this project, and it's never happened to me before. Probably never happened to me again, but it was in the National Post, it was in the UK, Japan News, Philippine News, all the Suns in Canada. So it was a pretty exciting day for us as a researcher. You do research that actually hits the news in a positive way, if you will. So, have incredible funding support has taken off as well. And we just got a CIHR grant just before Christmas. We're very excited about that, trying to evaluate the impact of education on patients. We've talked for 100 years, we do patient education, but we don't do it very well. So we're trying to do that. And we're also doing something called hospital at home as well, so we're going to grant for that. So when I think of impact, a bunch of things come to mind. A bunch of people have to be aware. Funding starts coming, invitations. I'm trying to assess, are we doing the right thing? I like to look in the mirror sometimes. And there's a lot of things, and we're collaborating with people around the world now with some of the work that we're doing, which is very, very exciting. So for me, the future is now. We're doing this thing called hospital at home, and basically acute care services in the hospital. This is the patient education system that we're just in the process of developing an evaluation tool for, working with a company to implement this and formally evaluate how this is actually affecting patient care. And then I'm also working on a project developing hardware and software for the closed loop medication administration system, where we can actually scan somebody's face and rely on it for positive patient identification. And I know that there's a lot of concern about that, but I'll argue that in 1994, when we started email, there was a lot of concern about that as well. I'm not saying we should be doing that. I think we need to be concerned about stuff, but I think we need to go down that way in a formal road. So I think that we need to use formal project protocols, scientific rigors, involve key stakeholders, start very small, keep it simple. The technology has to be intuitive, otherwise patients won't remember or figure out what we want them to do. Measure, measure, measure is the most important thing, and publish and share whatever you can. I never turn down an opportunity to talk, even though my wife kind of wishes that I would now and again. I don't mean talking like talk all the time at home, is what I mean by that. So what I was going to do, this video didn't work. Do we have 4 minutes or no? Because if we don't, we won't. Okay. So this is I'm from Saskatchewan, and as this was actually very therapeutic for me to present this to you guys. And I reflected back on what's happened in the last 24 years and I put it to a video, and I just want to share it with you. It's a Garth Brooks song, Cowboy, yes, on a farm, but anyway, that's another story. And if you listen to the words and watch the video, it's about our team, where we've come, what we're doing, and it's 4 minutes and 6 seconds.
It's coming, yeah.
See, I made it for you.
No, a dream is like a river, ever changing as it flows. And the dreamer's just a vessel that must follow where it goes, trying to learn from what's behind you, and never knowing what's in store. Makes each day a constant battle just to stay between the shores. And I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry, like a bird upon the wind. These waters are my sky, I'll never reach my destination if I never try. So I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry. Too many times we stand aside and let the water slip away. And what we put off till tomorrow has now become today. So don't you sit upon the shore and say you're satisfied. Choose to chance the rapids and dare to dance the tide. Yes, I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry, like a bird upon the wind. These waters are my sky, I'll never reach my destination if I never try. So I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry. There's bound to be rough waters, and I know I'll take some falls, but with the good Lord as my captain, I can make it through the storm. Yes, I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry, like a bird on the wind. These waters are my sky, I'll never reach my destination if I never try. So I will sail my.
Finish sailing his vessel. The river ran dry. I wasn't supposed to do that.
Oh.
Anyway, that's the end. So,
I didn't touch anything.
no, don't do it. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and share my story with you guys. I hope you found it
Thank you very much. It was like watching Sean grow up in front of our eyes. To see it happen. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm now going to turn it over to our discussant for today, Jim Bowen, to reflect on your presentation, to lead us in some thoughts around some questions or some issues that arose to him as part of the presentation. Jim, please take it away.
Okay, perfect.
So that was a fantastic presentation, Sean. Thank you for going through your pharmacy journey with us. I'm a little bit 6 years earlier than your pharmacy journey because I started 6 years before you started your journey. And that picture of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I was born about 2-3 days after that picture was taken. So just to give you some context associated with things that has meaning. So I think one of the things that I think it really came out of Sean's presentation the most, I think it's worthwhile looking at, is actually continuity of care and communication, and also the adoption of our continuity of care models. I think that we have the ability with the smartphones to be able to enhance how we communicate, not necessarily between pharmacists, but also then between sectors, between healthcare practitioners, and also potentially with patients. So we have an opportunity for this technology of smartphones to actually enhance a continuity of care. With that being said, it gives us the challenge to deal with technology integration in our pharmacy practice. For those of you that have been practicing for a long time, this presentation actually becomes a little bit, how would you put it, disheartening, in the sense that technology integration in pharmacy practice hasn't come as far as it should have over the past 20 to 30 years. I could have had some of this conversation in 1993, 1994, with respect to our communication and how things are going. The challenge is that we have to face the data silos. The issue of the fact that our information is contained in these artificial black boxes. And actually, when you think of it from say for example, for MedRec, we spend our time chasing after breaking down these silos, one thing after another. And there's something has to change in the way that healthcare delivery is made. And obviously the smartphone component becomes one piece of the puzzle. However, integration of this technology with EMRs, with EHRs, and actually from both the hospital to the community environment is essential. We're not going to get there, and actually we're compromising patient safety by not getting there. The fact that we actually have to chase after multiple people to make sure we've got the right meds just isn't making sense anymore with our technology where we're at. So it actually can be turned into a patient safety issue versus a communication tool. And I think that's where obviously Sean's work will be going.
So Sean, can I ask you just to respond to your Discussant's comment about that, the issue of data silo?
Yeah, I agree 100% that there is a big data silo. And I'm actually leading our DPMH work as well at the hospital. And it's a challenge. We're putting a lot of resources into identify this information, to clarify the information. The information is all there. But you're right, it's in areas that people don't have access to, and it's a real issue with that. There's definitely a silo between the GPs and the hospital staff, and I'm fortunate that I work with the GPs on a regular basis, and they always hold my feet to the fire where I'm like, oh, but we do it this way, and then like, you do it that way within your walls, but you don't communicate with us. There is definitely a silo.
Yeah. I think that's one of the main things, and that sort of actually leads to my next point: stakeholder engagement. The biggest challenge with this becomes then stakeholder engagement. We can change our behavior within our practice environment, but to your point, we need to be able to change the practice environment within other practitioners. We need to change the practice environment within our hospital administration and say this is the new standard, this is the norm, not what we might be doing 10, 15, 20 years ago. And also we have to also change our IT department's expectations about what should be done. And also, as Sean and I were talking about beforehand, the expectations of our EMR and our EHR vendors. It is no longer acceptable not to have this technology integrated within our IT systems, and that companies need to be able to adapt and meet our needs and not us meeting their needs from the integration. So we could have had this conversation back when Zubin gave me the pager in 1994, working with Digimedics and being able to get information to flow, to document, and to not necessarily be solely stuck in its silo. When we take a look at when we integrate EMR systems into our institutions, they become multi-million-dollar activities, but are they truly meeting the needs of the practitioners to deal with the communication and the safety issues, or are they meeting the needs of the vendor?
Sean, can I ask you to reflect on Jim's?
Yeah, one of the things that's a very good point is what we've tried to do is you're right, linking up your IMIT department and your administration to connect and try to break down those silos is so important. One of the things we've worked on is with our family physicians is in a physician's office, they'll have their own EMR that they have as digital. We have one person who's actually still handwriting charts, but they've now transitioned over, believe it or not. But they can actually scan a PDF, EHR Connect, they will actually upload it. And now we have scanned copies in our Cerner system so that when we're in the hospital, we can actually see the GP's histories there. So we're trying to break down those silos. The GPs are all over it and they don't get paid for that service either, which is a government issue. Yep. But we're doing is we're trying to evaluate the impact of that. And it was very fascinating from pharmacy-centric perspective. We did this work and the evaluators said, okay, well, we met with the docs and the hospitalists, you guys have hospitalists in, yeah, the hospitalists, they use it all the time, blah, blah, blah. I said, what about the rest of the team? So I'm the token allied health guy on this committee. And I'm like, what about the pharmacists and the social work and the physiotherapists? And so they decided to send a survey out. They had an overwhelming response from all of those people and talking about how they use these things all the time to facilitate discharges. And one of the biggest issues in the hospital is getting clogged up. So just by saying that we're bigger than just a doctor and a nurse is breaking down those barriers, and that we're using the information the same as the physicians.
So the other thing that Sean presented, which is fantastic, is using clinical trial protocols to study your quality improvements. All too frequently within practice, what happens is that we implement things, but we do not study them. And we do not put them in an environment where we have an explicit protocol that allows us to follow outcomes longitudinally, and also then to be able to publish them and to be able to disseminate them to other individuals that, as Sean mentioned, are suffering with exactly the same problem. I loved your example of the fact that when you talked about moving the pharmacist from the basement, and Zubin passed the pager to me in the basement of Mount Sinai Hospital. Anyways, to be able to do that, to move that transition, although has been occurring slowly over time, there are still institutions in our country where you may not see the light of day as a pharmacist in the basement. It was once explained to me that it was for security purposes when I worked in the basement of St. Joseph's Healthcare, Hamilton, because we had our windows actually taken away from us when the pharmacy was redesigned. Yeah. So I think that's really, really important. I think Sean made another really excellent point about keeping it simple. Collect the data that's important and keep it really, really simple. On the other note, I'd really like to understand how you got involved in using mixed methods to be able to study what you're doing.
I consulted with people who were smarter than I as I designed the trials, because I'm a pharmacist. I'm trained like many of you in this room are trained, and I'm a clinical pharmacist. I don't have a PhD. It's not an area of expertise for me, so I consulted with people. Say, I want to do this thing. I want to have a quantifiable, measurable outcome. What would be the best approach to do it? And as I've moved along, I've learned that hiring people to do that incredible work and hiring people to do the various pieces, I need to understand it, but I need to work with people to get it to get the outcomes that we want. Because I'm a firm believer we need solid data. As someone who uses clinical trials all the time, I critique them all the time. I want to have this as solid as you can. It's tough to do it solid. It's tough work to make this a solid thing.
Sean, you might be interested. We just launched a new Masters of Science in Pharmacy program.
I was talking today about it. Yeah, it's weeks old, I understand.
Yeah, that's right.
But specifically aimed at practitioner researchers who might be. Sorry. Jim, any final comments before we turn it over to the audience to ask their questions?
Absolutely. So I'm going to introduce my bias. I'm a health technology assessment doer. And I think what's important in this whole thing is that although we may look at our clinical outcomes, we have to look at our economic, we have to look at our practitioner related, as Sean has looked at, and we have to look at our organizational implications of our technologies. One of the challenges, and I'll relate it to any technology in a hospital, is that we are really, really good in pharmacy to evaluate technology through our Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee. We've been doing evidence-based introduction of new technologies in our institutions for decades. However, that same approach is not actually happening for other technologies within the institutions, whether it be CT scanners, smartphones. There is not an evidence-based process for introduction, and this is where health technology assessment comes in, to be able to actually look at the incremental benefit, not just the benefit pre-post. That's only looking at what changes, but the incremental benefit. And so the need to introduce randomized control trials, or to look at randomized control trial evidence as we introduce new technologies, because in a public health system, it's all the same money. Why should the evidence and the requirements for drugs be any different than that of what you would have for CTs, for MRIs, for PETs? A lot of the times these technologies get introduced without RCT evidence. When you speak to device manufacturers, they'll say the life cycle of the technology is too short to permit RCTs. The challenge might be actually maybe the technology shouldn't be introduced if you don't have RCTs. And the challenge is that these technologies do not require randomized control trial evidence to be introduced into the health system for regulatory approval. They have to show they work and that they're safe. They don't have to show that they're better than what we do. And so I'd like you to speak to the part of how do you know what you're doing with the smartphone, to sort of cap off, is any better than what you were doing from a randomized control trial evidence, because we have to make sure that we use the same standard of evidence in actually measuring our interventions and what we do.
Well, first of all, you summarized the other issues there beautifully. It's always frustrating me that you can just show up and put your $1.6 million machine here, and we have no idea. We know it's safe, and we know it works, but we have no idea if it's better than the $300,000 one that's been there for 10 years. And so one of the issues that we have here is we don't know if these are better than pagers, which is, if it was easy to do that research, there would be so many papers out there. So we're trying to, every project we do, we try to refine it a little bit more, try to ask the questions a little more structured. And some of the stuff you have to rely on is the soft responses, subjective responses, the feelings, the facilitated group stuff. So we're starting to get into now, I always feel, maybe it's the pharmacist in me, that you have to have a primary outcome that has something you can do stats on. And we always struggle with that with some of these trials, but we're now getting into, we have to have facilitated meetings, facilitated interactions with users to find out themes and that sort of stuff, because that's the soft stuff about how is it useful and not useful. How is, one of the things, studies I want to do and we have a design for, is what is patients' perspectives of, you're in a room with a patient and your pager goes off, versus if you're in a room with a patient and your smartphone, you pull it out, what do they think about that, versus if your smartwatch goes off. And I'm trying to design it such that we have a hidden camera or something along those lines, because my feeling is that if a pager goes off, you're a busy doctor. If you have to pull this thing out of your pocket, your wife or your daughter wants to. And this here, I don't even know if they would know that I looked at my watch. So, but I think we just need more data in a thoughtful, meaningful way to actually get to the bottom of it. We all know these work. Parachutes work. We don't need to study about it, but we have to figure out how and learn from that.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Sean. We have a few minutes left for any questions from either our audience attending via teleconference or anybody in the room. Any questions from anybody? And invite you now, if you're attending by teleconference, feel free to type in your questions and we will have them read here. In the interim, if there are any questions from anybody in the room. Della. This is Della Croto from the Faculty of Pharmacy.
Hi, Sean. Doesn't surprise me that the Saskatchewan boys doing such good work. I was just wondering if you've had, talked a lot about the team, which is great, transitions of care, and have you done any work with community pharmacists around the hospital, including them in the team and what could happen there? Because I always, I think that's a really important link.
They're the missing piece, and I'm embarrassed to say they're the most challenging members to engage. And I don't know why that is, but my own profession, it's very challenging to engage. So I think that we need to do more work there. And one project that I really wanted to do was actually have community pharmacy, GPs, and hospitals talking on the same platform. We ended up going GPs and hospitals for, we still have work to do on the engagement piece, if you will. So they need to be there. I agree with you 100%. Because it's the GPs and the community pharmacists that are doing most of the communication. I agree with you. Very good comment.
Well, thank you very much for that question, and thank you everybody for attending today. We've come to the end of our CPE rounds for February. A very big round of applause for our presenter, Sean Spina, and for our discussant, Jim Bowen, and a very small token of our appreciation to both of you for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you all for attending, and please join us next month for our next CPE rounds. Thank you very much and goodbye.